rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Prophecies foretell the establishment of a world government in the earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the Battle of Armageddon. This one world government will be ruled eventually by the Antichrist, who will receive his power straight from Satan himself. This Antichrist will demand absolute obeisance to his agenda and his kingdom, and will endeavor to control every aspect of every person's life on the earth. Well, in order to do so, the Antichrist must have disarmed the entire globe, or he's going to endeavor to do so. And the only reason to disarm law-abiding citizens is to control them. So the United Nations is the seat of this world governing entity today, and has an entire office devoted to disarmament. It's called the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, or the UNODA. The political pressure from the current world government to disarm the globe, and believe me, there is pressure from the United Nations to do that. This is the ongoing fulfillment of the prophecy of this world government. We will discuss the big picture behind the call for gun control in our world on today's edition of End of the Age. So, in the news today, wow, gun control is at the top of every newspaper in America and around the world in a lot of places. Gun control, gun control. So for those of you who are joining us on our news stations, we're going on news stations all the time. This End of the Age program was originally called Politics and Religion up until a year or two ago. And that's what I will get into a little bit today. A little bit of politics and a little bit of religion. And so the recent mass shooting, everybody knows about it, the recent mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, it has escalated the call for gun control across the nation. A quick search of the term gun control on the web reveals 27.1 million results. So looking at the atmosphere in our country and the debate over gun control, I like to look at issues from many different angles. Prophetically, how does this have to do with the prophecies of the Bible? Or does it? Some issues don't have anything to do, but some do. So we look at it prophetically, politically, historically. I'll get into some history today, and logically, and then every other way. I want to see really the big picture. What's really going on here with this issue? And many times, if you just look at the surface of an issue from, let's say, just by watching the nightly news, you're going to get a very, very biased opinion and really what's going on with that issue. So I want to get into it from every angle. And let's look at the boiling issue from several directions. And I probably won't get through all of my program today. I could do a 2 or 3 or 4 hour program. So if you want a copy of my notes or my outline, just email me, drobbins at endtime or dnorvell@endtime.com. I'll get you a copy of my notes. It's got the whole thing all the way through, and it'd be a great program for you to read. I'll try to get through as much as I can, though. And but just look at it, at this from the big picture rather than getting caught up in the hype of the media, because it's easy to do that. Every news station you turn it to, they're telling you the same thing. And you can look at it and go, oh my goodness, man, this is what happened, and I without a shadow of a doubt, well, that's actually may not be true. So I've got a couple questions for you. It's very important. When Timothy McVeigh used a bomb primarily composed of fertilizer to destroy the Oklahoma City's Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in '95, did anybody hear a call for a ban on fertilizer? And after 9/11, where 2 planes killed approximately 3,000 Americans, did you hear a call to ban airplanes? In November of 2017, when 8 people were killed, and I was in New York at this time, and more than a dozen injured when a man drove a pickup that he had rented from Home Depot store on a crowded bike path. Did you hear anyone call for a ban on pickup trucks? The University of California at Merced, the knife attack. An 18-year-old student slashed several students and a teacher in November of 2015, and there were 4 wounded. He used a knife. Nazareth Mediterranean restaurant, a knife attack. A man slashed diners in Columbus, Ohio with a machete. February 16, 4 people were wounded. Did you hear a call for a ban on knives or machetes? No, you didn't. Because it's not the weapon. It's not the choice of weapon that it is. It's simply what's going on in that person's mind.
We live in critical times. If the final 7 years started today, would you know what to do? God's people need to understand the prophecies that are taking place. Daniel 11:33 says, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many." To guide the people around us, we must first receive instruction ourselves on the biblical prophecies of the end time. End Time Ministries is introducing the End Time 1000. We have created Jerusalem Prophecy College online to help you be ready to inform those around you. The goal is to have at least 1,000 people prepared to instruct others. By joining the End Time 1000, you can fulfill Daniel 11:33. Sign up for Jerusalem Prophecy College online and be equipped to guide your friends and loved ones during the final 7 years. Go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com. That's JerusalemProphecyCollege.com.
We got married in 2003. We clashed immediately. Everything seemed to be going wrong. We started following End Time Ministries, and we started going to End Time Bible studies.
About our life's never been the same. It's just been so powerful and so great, and God has done such a mighty work that saved my life, and it saved my soul for eternity.
God did use this ministry to literally bring us to Him and make the old man pass away and the new man come to life.
Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
Offering hope to people like us.
With every dollar, you change lives and provide hope for people just like Mark and Adrian. Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
In the St. Cloud Crossroads Mall knife attack, a man with a military-style knife on September 17th, 2016 wounded 10 people. An Ohio knife car attack, the man used a knife and a car. A man rams his car into a crowd of students, slashes them with a butcher knife, and there are 11 people wounded. After all of this, did you hear any call for the banning of cars or knives? No. So why guns? Well, you see, folks, it's not the weapon of choice that's in question. It is the mental state of a person who will decide to take an inanimate object, whether it's a car, a bomb, a fertilizer, a knife, a gun, or a million other things, and decide to do harm to another human being. So what has happened? My question, I've got several questions. What's happened in our society that would start people on a killing binge? President Trump just recently, right as I was going on the air, I was reading an article. He's questioning the movies and video games that are so violent. You see killings, and just, you know, you're rewarded in some of these video games for going back and killing some people, finishing them off. Well, we should be questioning that. Absolutely. Not an inanimate object laying under your bed and you decide, hey, I'm going to take this and go do harm to someone. They've got this all wrong. And what's the big picture of this agenda here? Would somebody with an agenda go out and do something like that? I mean, let me ask you a question. Would stricter gun laws work? Think about it. We have laws against murder, and yet these individuals that have perpetrated these crimes, they went out and committed murder. So a law doesn't necessarily stop somebody from doing an act of doing a crime. People who are insane or who are motivated by an agenda, i.e. a terrorist attack, they have no regard for the law. You could have 1 million gun laws, and if someone is motivated enough or insane enough, then a tragedy can still occur because they're unlawful. They don't pay any attention to laws. The only people that pay attention to the laws are the law-abiding citizens. So if you pass 1 million gun laws and say, everybody turn in your guns, guess who's going to turn their guns in? The law-abiding citizens. None of these tragedies are going to stop. And many have referred to Israel in times as an example of strict gun laws that curb violence. But has that worked? Do laws, more laws on gun control, does that protect against violence? Well, an article from Arutz Sheva ran an op-ed today, and it says that Israel proves that the NRA's arguments have been correct all along. So, the school shooting in Florida obviously has reignited the gun rights debate in the United States over the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution adopted in 1791, which states, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, in the past, proponents of limiting civil access to firearms have extolled Israel as having the proper approach to limiting mass shootings, pointing to the numerous legal hoops that Israelis have to jump through in order to be granted a gun license. Well, in reality, Israel's gun policy is living proof of the arguments that the American gun lobby, NRA, has been making for years. Gun rights advocates contend that the way to stop mass shootings is by ensuring that there are always well-armed citizens present who can neutralize the shooter. Like I said before, you could have 1 million gun laws and a criminal, somebody with a criminal mind, they don't care about the law. They're a criminal. So if they want to do something like this, they'll get a hold of a gun and they'll go in there. Passing more laws and passing more regulations on law-abiding citizens, it's not going to work. And as the NRA chairman, Wayne LaPierre, always says, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. A bedrock of the NRA's philosophy is that criminals will always acquire guns illegally, and draconian gun laws only render law-abiding citizens defenseless. So let's look at Israel. A lot of people bring up Israel all the time because of their gun laws. Well, when the knife, K-N-I-F-E, knife intifada, erupted in September of 2015, the Israeli government's response was to ease the process for the populace to obtain weapons. And in other words, making it more accessible. And after a particularly bloody Jerusalem shooting attack that killed 4, the then public security minister, Gilad Erdan, drastically changed the gun laws in order to significantly raise the number of armed civilians on the streets. Well, instantly, graduates of the Special Forces units and the IDF officers with the rank of lieutenant and above were permitted to purchase guns at their will. And security guards were allowed to bring their guns home after work, and the minimum age for a license was reduced from 21 to 18. Irvin explained that civilians well trained in the use of weapons provide reinforcement in the struggle against terrorism. And so while Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat called for every resident to carry a gun and was even photographed traveling the city carrying a Glock 23. Well, in addition, the overwhelming majority of terror attacks in Israel are stopped by armed civilians, not law enforcement. For example, the terrorist in 2016, the Sarona market attack, they were stopped by armed passerbys. And a pistol-carrying tour guide put an end to the 2017 ramming attack in Arnona that left 4 soldiers dead. So in Israeli eyes, guns are a valuable deterrent against terrorism. Because you remember, law enforcement normally shows up when the crime is over with. The crime's already taken place. And so, in fact, terrorists have told the Shin Bet Internal Security Service that they often target Haredi Jews due to the high likelihood that they're unarmed. Gun control supporters would answer that the mandatory military service that every Israeli undergoes justifies the trust Israel has of its own citizens. However, this argument doesn't hold water. The vast majority of the IDF soldiers aren't combat soldiers, and they're certified as .02 riflemen. So to be an 02 requires one to shoot 40 to 70 bullets. The pistol course needed to obtain a license takes less than 4 hours. So it's a far cry from the highly trained population that the left imagines. Gun control has been proven to be a dismal failure in Israel. The Israeli Arab communities are rife with illegal weapons, with some police estimates putting the number of unlicensed weapons in the Arab sector as high as 500,000. And think about it. Think about that just for a second. The most heavily guarded borders in the world and a highly professional Shin Bet they're still not enough to prevent criminals from obtaining illegal firearms. So when terrorists attacked a school in Melat in 1974, Israel did not declare every school a gun-free zone. It passed a law mandating armed security in schools, providing weapons, training to teachers, and today it runs frequent active school shooter drills. And there have been only 2 school shootings since then, and both of those have ended with teachers killing the terrorists. So it is an approach that the Americans should take a look at to end the constant slaughter of innocents. And so you look at what's going on here, the big picture. A lot of people have referred to Israel. Hey, look at Israel's gun control laws. They've been a dismal failure. This is an op-ed from the Arutz Sheva, Channel 7 in Israel this morning. And so let's look at controlling the world through gun control, because the Bible prophesies there's going to be a world government in the future. It's going to be ran by the Antichrist. And in order for him to do what he wants to do and command complete obeisance to himself and his world governing body, he has to disarm the world. Now look at the political situation globally today. And with communism and socialism sweeping most of the world, and that ideology controlling most of the nations in the world today, and most of them having gun control laws, then you look at the United States, and the whole international community is looking at us. And up until this point, we've pretty much, some presidents more than others, have been in absolute, they've all agreed that, they've been in support of this world governing body. Some of them, like I say, much more than others. Up until the 2016 election with Donald Trump. And now he started pulling us out of the world government, a lot of different things, and he's pro-Second Amendment. So the international community is looking at us and saying, okay, we're not going to be able to get anything passed with the current administration in, so what can we do to still kind of get our fingers woven in through the American society? Well, like Hillary Clinton and has said, and other leaders have said, never waste a good crisis. So right on the heels of every mass shooting that we've had, and I'm not saying that those have been staged, I don't know that, but I'm saying right on the heels of it, people come right in and start saying, gun control, gun control, gun control. And gun control's not the answer. But there are people who would love to push that agenda. Remember, there's a whole arm of the United Nations that's about disarmament. You say, well, that's all about nuclear weapons. No, no, no. It's about disarmament, period. Small weapons, everything, all the way down. And so there's a whole arm of the United Nations devoted to that. Why? Because they can't fully have the world government that they want unless you disarm the people, the populace. It's never going to happen. The only reason for the disarmament of law-abiding citizens is in order to control them. The absolute control with no means of resistance. So let's talk about control of the world through gun control. And I'm going to go back through a little history here because we need to know what how this nation was founded. How have we become the most successful nation on the earth in the last just a short 240 plus years? There's been nations on the earth that are thousands of years old that don't come close to the power and the might of the United States of America. Why? Well, there's several reasons for that. Obviously, we were founded on Christian principles and this, that, and the other. But our founders understood that to have a means of resistance against a tyrannical government, people have to be armed. So, let's get into a little bit of history here. And then I'll try to wrap up with the United Nations and some of the things they're doing currently with the arms trade treaty and different things. So, when governments fear people, there is liberty, okay? When the people fear government, there's tyranny. And the strongest reason for the people to retain the right and keep and bear arms as a last resort to protect themselves is against tyranny in government. Thomas Jefferson said that. So, after years of slavery, our forefathers defected from England with the dreams of a land that would be governed by the people, not a tyrannical king. In an effort to guarantee more freedom and less control, they signed the Constitution of the United States, which limited governmental control of the people. To further restrict any ability to establish a strong central government, the U.S. House of Representatives devoted the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, of the Constitution to the protection of individual liberties. Of these, the Second Amendment gives every United States citizen the right to keep and bear arms, not with the intent of providing weapons to hunt rabbits, but as a means of defense against a tyrannical government that would seek to enslave individuals and to strip them of their God-given right. To what? Well, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Second Amendment states this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, there are people in the United States of America today, powerful people, who would love to absolutely take that right away. These people are the ones that right after a mass shooting, which was perpetrated by an individual who was not right in their mind, right after that mass shooting, they'll get on the news and say, gun control, we need more gun control. Gun control would never have stopped an individual from going in and doing what they did. If they have a criminal mind and they want to do something like that, it doesn't matter whether they use a gun or they drive a truck up on a sidewalk through a crowded bunch of people, they'll find a way to commit the crime. Or fertilizer and blowing it, which is what Timothy McVeigh used to blow up the Oklahoma building. So the gun thing is irrelevant. Now, some say that obviously that this is not an individual right, the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, but merely it gives each state government the power to maintain a military force. Well, the reason for the debate is simple. All men are endowed by their Creator, not from government, but by our Creator, with certain unalienable rights. One of those rights is the ability to keep and protect their freedom. Consequently, any government or dictator or world government seeking to strip the United States citizens of those freedoms and to control the people have to intentionally misinterpret the Second Amendment and take away the citizens' ability to resist, hence gun control. So, isn't it clear why our forefathers signed the Second Amendment into law? They knew exactly what it was like to live in slavery under a dictator who disarmed the masses and left no means of resistance. If you don't have any means of resistance, the dictator can say, "What you do this and you have to do it, or I go off to jail," or whatever. So the critical question today then is this: if the only reason for disarmament is to control the masses, why is there presently such a push for gun control in the United States and around the world? It's all about control, because the ones that would be turning in their guns would be law-abiding citizens. There's not a criminal or a thief that's going to say, "Yeah, I'll go down to the courthouse and turn my guns in." It's not going to happen. So this is not about guns. It's all about control at the end of the day. So when you're watching the nightly news and they're saying gun control, that's not the issue. But there is an agenda pushing that when it's all said and done.
Israel, there is no other place like it on the face of the earth. Over 4,000 years ago, God gave this land to Abraham and his seed and said that he would put his name in Jerusalem. The world watches as this tiny nation stands in spite of all the obstacles. Irvin and Judy, along with the End Time team, would like to invite you to travel with us to the Holy Land. This trip will be a wonderful and life-changing experience. Our Spring End Time Prophecy Tour will have the privilege of being the first End Time tour to visit Jerusalem as the recognized capital of Israel. Some of the highlights will be the Mount of Olives, the Temple Mount, the Tomb of Jesus, the boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, the baptisms in the Jordan River, and we will also visit Petra in Jordan. If you would like to experience the Bible in full color, join us April 26th through May 11th, 2018. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463, and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel Tour to receive your information today.
Do you believe we're living in the end times? If so, what's the one magazine you should subscribe to? End Time is the magazine designed to guide you through the end times. Irvin highly recommends End Time magazine so you can stay informed with what's going on in the news and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Call 1-800-363-8463 and get End Time magazine for 2 years for only $29. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com to take advantage of this special offer.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So, if you remember your history from high school, our forefathers went from armed citizens to slaves. For over 1,000 years, it had been customary for Englishmen to serve as a citizen's army or a militia, which originally required every individual to be armed and to defend the realm if needed. This system of universal armament was successful for 2 reasons. And you can put these 2 reasons here today as well. Each citizen had a way to defend himself and to protect his individual liberties. And number 2, monarchical rule was kept in check by sheer physical force should a tyrannical government try to enslave the population. But during the Stuart period, 1603 to 1714, there was civil war between kings and parliaments, which resulted in each side vying for control of the militia. Consequently, this led to the disarmament of many of the English citizens because both sides sought to confiscate the arms of the opposing factions. So a lot of the law-abiding citizens had their guns taken away. And in the end, the Parliament forces prevailed, and the citizen soldiers of England were turned into the new model army. That was in 1645. However, Parliament misjudged the loyalty of the army to the people of England. And this, coupled with no Parliament paycheck and an attack on their religious freedoms, led to the Rump Parliament, where the army actually took over the government under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. But Cromwell died in 1659, and the Parliament was reinstated by General George Monk in 1660. Now, this new Parliament, which was made up of those that favored the monarchy, placed Charles II on the throne, and Charles disbanded the army, except for those who were loyal to the crown. And immediately, Charles began to disarm any person who was judged dangerous to his empire. And this left the standing armies in the power of the king to protect his kingdom. And without the system of universal armament, it ended the ability of English citizens to defend their individual liberties, and it forced them into slavery. So, what was the original intent then of the coming out from under the England tyrannical government? Well, after defecting from England because of the tyrannical rule of King George, our forefathers sought to build a new country that was governed by the people. And these were educated men. They knew that. And over time, there would be those that would, they knew that there would be those that would try to usurp authority over free American citizens. So in order to declare our freedom from oppression and to provide a safeguard against a tyrannical government ever enforcing its will upon free people, the original founders wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. And these documents clearly define the mindset of our forefathers in the late 18th century. The opening statements of the Declaration of Independence provide a distinct remedy for the infectious disease of a tyrannical government, which would seek to deprive free men of their God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration states that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new, and it says it's their right and it's their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their security. So if you look at our political atmosphere right now, Donald Trump is pro-Second Amendment. He's pro-gun, let's say, or pro-law-abiding citizens having guns. But we still are feeling the effects of the previous administration, who was all about gun control. I mean, let's face it, Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Secretary John Kerry, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, all of them were anti-gun. And they were pushing for gun control. One way or the other, they were pushing for it. But nothing ever really major got accomplished during that 8-year stint. But they were still pushing for it. Well, now President Trump comes in, and he's pro-Second Amendment, but he's feeling the huge pressure to cave on this issue. And he talked about, regulating bump stocks and a lot of different things, and we'll see what happens. I've been happy to see what he brought in some teachers and students the other night and talked to them and had them give him solutions. And some of them came up with some great solutions to it, to mass school shootings and different things. And he was saying, look, we need to look at the mental health issues and background checks. And now he's talking about looking at violent movies and violent video games. He's talking about the right stuff. And I'm hoping he stands firm on the gun issue, because once you take away people's guns, you say, well, these people aren't wanting to take away everybody's guns. That's not true. They'll talk about AR-15s today, but once they get that, you give them an inch and they'll take 100 miles, because their goal is no guns. A lot of them have made statements, we've got too many guns on the streets. So it's not just AR-15s. That's just where they're starting. And so I've got a lot of friends who have AR-15s. None of them have ever killed anybody. Why? Because they're sane. They have a sane mind. It's somebody who is out of their mind that would take a gun, whether it's a pistol, AR-15, it's irrelevant. Go rent a truck from Home Depot and go kill some people on a walking path. It's irrelevant. But there are people that are pushing for gun control. So let me jump back into history and then I'll bring you up to today. So in an effort to further restrict, we're talking about our forefathers here, in an effort to further restrict governmental encroachment upon the people, the Constitution of the United States was signed into law 1787. And it remains the supreme law of the land, or it's supposed to be. And in essence, it tells the government what it can and cannot do. Now, we've had presidents that obviously have tried to twist that, but that's what it's supposed to do. And in order to avoid any dictatorship or tyranny, the original framers built a system of checks and balances into the government by dividing it into three parts. You remember this from school: legislative, executive, and judicial, thus limiting the ability of any one political entity from retaining all the power. There's a checks and balances here. So regardless of which state each framer was representing, one main determination propelled them all. No dictatorship shall ever run the United States of America. That was their goal. That's why they set up a system of checks and balances. Nobody could get all the power. But when you have people that get in there, that they're the same people behind the scenes are running all three of those checks and balances, then you got a problem. And that's what the world government being established in the world today would like to do. They're running many countries around the world, and they'd love to get their hands on the United States. And they thought they just about had it. It's the process of globalization. But they thought they just about had it, and then comes along this rogue person, Donald Trump, that they can't control. And then now you realize why they're all screaming. And you say, well, why is it such a big deal? Because we're talking about the prophesied world government. That's what's being established in our world right now. It's already established in many ways. The international community, they can't get their hands on the United States. They thought they had it. But when Donald Trump came into power and started pulling us out of the world governing body in many ways, these people are going out of their mind. So they realize we're not going to be able to get gun control through the very top, so we're going to have to come in these other ways and get it. So there's an agenda behind all of this. It's been being pushed for years. They're just coming at it from different angles now. They have to, because they can't go through the president. They can't control him. But there is huge pressure, and I'm anxious to see what happens. So jump back into history again. After the Constitution was adopted, several state representatives determined that the wording of the Constitution was vague and concerning individual liberties. And as a result, James Madison wrote the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, known as the Bill of Rights. Many of you already know this. These 10 amendments are a very specific list of restrictions placed on the federal government and further protecting the individual rights of each United States citizen, and cannot be usurped under any circumstance. And in forging these documents, history tells us that even though our founding fathers did not always see eye to eye, there were two things they all agreed upon. Very, very important. A central government or a dictator, again, should never usurp authority over the people. It's supposed to be government of the people, for the people, by the people. Now, there have been many administrations that have got completely away from that, but that's how it's supposed to run. Then when Donald Trump came in and started saying, hey, it's going to be America first and I'm going to give the power back to the people, there was this huge breath of fresh air that was let out by a lot of people and said, whoa, I didn't think we had a voice anymore. And that's why a lot of people turned out to vote that had just sat at home in years prior, because they thought, man, this might actually work. And then number two, our forefathers agreed on the fact that universal armament is the only check against a tyrannical government. So if those checks and balances, judicial and the three, I can't even remember. I'm sitting there going through the program. I can't remember all three. Judicial and the president and the electrical or something. I can't remember. Consequently, the first point is addressed in the Constitution. And while protection for the latter is clearly stated in the Second Amendment. And so the Second Amendment, remember, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So of the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is the most debated today. Some have said that it gives the state of the right to control any militia and that only those individuals should be armed. Others say, because of the Game Act law passed in England by the English in 1671, which restricted hunting to those of wealth, that the Second Amendment only allows citizens and a weapon capable of hunting. But this is simply not the case. The original framers of the Constitution knew that there needed to be a specific provision to arm the people. Why? The answer is clearly found throughout the documents that were used to forge our nation. Armed United States citizens have the right to keep and to protect their individual liberties and property against any government or dictatorship that would try to strip them of either. Not only were arms to be used as a defense against tyrannical government, but our forefathers, who also believed that it was the duty of every American citizen to throw off any such government or dictator and to provide new leadership for the future of that nation.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the End Time team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463 and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
Okay, so my brain went blank there for a second. It's the legislative, executive, and judicial branches are the checks and balances. Sorry about that. I was going a little too fast. So that's the reason for the Second Amendment. Without the universal armament of the population, this would not be possible. And for this cause, our forefathers pledged their lives, fortunes, and their sacred honor to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Second Amendment, thus protecting the right of every individual United States citizen to keep and bear arms. They understood there was only one reason why any government or dictator would seek to disarm the population: absolute control with no means of resistance. Now, there have been efforts to disarm the United States for years. And gun control in the United States, however, was virtually unheard of until the early 1900s. And since then, at the federal level, there are 3 sets of gun control laws have been passed, upon which most disarmament lawsuits are founded. Number 1, the National Firearms Act of 1934 placed a huge tax on machine guns and other gangster weapons. The Gun Control Act of 1968 made it illegal to purchase a rifle or a shotgun by mail order. President Kennedy was shot with a mail order rifle, and called for stricter licensing requirements for dealers and further detailed individuals restricted from purchasing a firearm. And then 3, the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act of 1993. It required a 5-day waiting period and background check for the sale of handguns, as well as requiring the establishment of a national instant criminal background check system. We still have that today. I go to buy a gun, instant background check. And now that I have a concealed carry permit in Texas, I don't have to do that. So, over the past few years, attempts at gun control legislation in the United States have been almost non-existent at the federal level. Even with these laws on the books, Americans still find it fairly easy to acquire a gun. With recent victories such as McDonnell versus Heller, in which the Supreme Court ruled that the Chicago, Illinois ban on handgun ownership was unconstitutional, it's not the past or present that has gun control owners concerned, but it's the future. The previous administration, think about it. Like I said, they were all anti-gun. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Eric Holder, John Kerry, just to name a few. They were anti-gun. Now, you're talking about the leaders of our nation over the past administration, that 8-year stint. They were anti-gun. But our Constitution, the Second Amendment, says that the right of every American citizen to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But the President of the United States and his administration, they were against that. You look at their voting records and different statements they've made. So you say, well, what's the agenda that you're talking about? Why? Why are they always against gun control, preaching that? Like I said, after 9/11, you didn't hear them trying to ban airplanes. Did anybody even hear that at all? But yet in one morning, they killed 3,000 people using airplanes as weapons. Why is that? Well, the United Nations, we're talking about the world government on the earth today. The United Nations is the seat of that prophesied world government that will be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. The Antichrist is eventually going to usurp authority over this global governing body. The United Nations is the seat of that world governing body in the earth today. The United Nations has a whole office devoted to the disarmament of the globe. That's what their whole job is for. Those people go in there every day and they're paid to come up with ways to manipulate nations to disarm. Go to the United Nations website. You see exactly what I'm talking about. Look under their arms of disarmament. It's not just nuclear weapons or chemical weapons. It's everything. So the United Nations, let's talk about the Arms Trade Treaty. Many of you will recognize that. When an international treaty on the sale of small arms was proposed in 2006, the Bush administration opposed it due to the potential loopholes in the treaty, and he chose rather to rely on national control. And at the time, the United States was the only nation to stand in opposition of it. However, President Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced in October 2010 that they would reverse the United States position and support the United Nations sponsored talks on a proposed arms trade treaty, or ATT. Well, and the final negotiations were going to occur in July of 2012. And although the United Nations, would like to pass the arms trade treaty off as an international treaty restricting the exporting and importing of illegal firearms. So in other words, it doesn't affect me as a United States citizen. It's just the exporting and importing. Okay, it's so much more than that. Former United Nations Ambassador John Bolton set the record straight in an interview with the USRKBA concerning the UN treaty. He said this, and this is very important because the UN treaty, the ATT is not necessarily dead at this point. So the hidden agenda, this is John Bolton, and I'm quoting. He said, the hidden agenda of a lot of the people who sought to negotiate the small arms treaty really had less to do with reducing the dangers internationally and a lot more to do with creating a framework for gun control statutes at the national level. He said there was very little doubt if you looked at the non-governmental organizations that were surrounding the UN and the negotiations that they were pursuing, some of the language they were trying to introduce into the negotiations, that the international aspects of the whole process were much less significant from their point of view than trying to constrain the national governments. And specifically, and most importantly, constrain the United States. Because remember, the United States is kind of this rogue nation out here, and that we've got all the Second Amendment in our Constitution, and they would love to take that out and take away your right to keep and bear arms. Well, John Bolton went on to say that after the treaty is approved, it'll come into, and it comes into force. He said, you'll find out that it has this implication or that implication, and it requires the Congress to adopt some measure that restricts ownership of firearms. Now, remember, not just nuclear weapons, that we're talking about the small arms trade treaty. And the Obama administration, he stated, knows that it cannot obtain the kind of legislation purely in a domestic context, because the Obama administration, Secretary of State John Kerry signed us on to this. You realize that. And John Bolton said that they will use an international agreement as an excuse to get domestically what they couldn't otherwise. So no wonder President Obama and Mrs. Hillary Clinton the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton signed on to support the treaty. If ratified in the U.S. Senate, it would have accomplished overnight what they've been trying to do for years. Place stricter gun control laws on every citizen in the United States. And it's now obvious that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Eric Holder, all of them, they were willing to sidestep the Constitution of the United States, and they were going to work hand in hand with the United Nations for the universal disarmament of every person on earth in order to achieve one common goal: global governance. That's what it all ties into. There is a huge agenda. You say, well, all that, Dave, you're sensationalizing it. Absolutely not. Secretary of State John Kerry signed the United States onto this mess. And, I mean, you're talking about tying us right into the United Nations effort to control small arms, not just in international trade. Remember what John Bolton said. So we're talking about global governance here. All of those individuals I just mentioned were globalists. They believe in a one-world government. So, global governance. This gun control, this huge agenda comes from, it's a socialistic agenda. The United Nations is a socialistic governing body, and they want to disarm. Go to the United Nations website. It's all on there. Global governance. What does the United Nations really hope to gain from an international arms treaty? Control, control, control. Remember, the gun control plea is all about control in the end, because you're trying to control law-abiding citizens. Gun laws do not control criminals and people with a criminal mind. Gun control will never control that. The plea for gun control is about controlling law-abiding citizens. And as an institution, the United States, the United Nations of a global governance, since its inception, the United Nations founding members have dreamed of a globalized world where all nations will operate under the rule of international law. The only way for that to happen would be for them to universally disarm the planet, which would allow them to strategically position their fully armed UN peacekeeping forces around the world to keep the peace. And so with this in mind, the United Nations Charter, which was drafted, many of you know, by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy, and signed in 1945, gives the UN Security Council the responsibility, with the help of a military staff committee, the regulation and possible disarmament of the world's weapons, hence the armed treaties. And if these treaties were ratified by the U.S. Senate, the United Nations and President Obama would have accomplished the goal of bypassing the Second Amendment to implement stricter gun control laws on American citizens. The United Nations does not have a Second Amendment because it's diametrically opposed to the idea of arming citizens. Why? Because absolute control with no means of resistance. Remember, the only reason for gun control is to leave people, is about absolute control, no means of resistance. Why would you take away somebody's ability to defend themselves and their family from a perpetrator? Why would you even dream about doing that? It makes no sense. So, in tying it all together, the Bible prophesies about this world government. It's being formed in the earth right now, folks. According to the Bible, there's going to be a world government established on the earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it will control the world politically, religiously, and economically. This global government is eventually going to be ruled by one man, the Antichrist, a personage referred to in Scripture as a very evil individual. The Antichrist, the son of perdition, a very evil man. Revelation 13 describes this coming new world order. It's very important that you understand there is an agenda globally to control every human on the planet. And in order for them to do that, they have to disarm every citizen of the globe. And there is a huge effort going on right now to do just that.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.